GNT show is intended for mature audiences. Parental discussion is advice. Live long and prosper, bitches.
Are friends with benefits?
Speaking of having a good time, Terry.
Dayton broke the G&T show. This is now the David Mack Appreciation Hour.
You assholes.
What is it about this guy that people love him so much?
With his purple velvet cape and his crown. I thought it was a little much when he had us carry him in the studio on a throne. I am awesome! Look what I have done! Look what I have brought upon the world!
There is an urge to go nya 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 nya.
I heard rumors that you might be working on something else, but we won't pry much. I'm gonna say
I'm gonna pry a little.
Dare you! How dare you ask me to change it? Do you not understand the majesty of my genius? And the guy sitting next to me looked at me like he was, like I'd cramped in his hat.
Yeah, it's the professionalism that sells the show. That's right.
I would like to say, first off, thank you. This is Terry from the G&T show. I'll pick it up just to make sure, because there's a lot of background noise here at the Star Trek Las Vegas convention. This is Terry from the G&T show, and we're going to have to turn off the tribbles.
Our tribbles have attitudes. We have troubles with tribbles.
We do have troubles with tribbles.
Lots of troubles.
And we have a lot of neighbors who are playing music and stuff, but that's typical for a Star Trek convention. There's a lot of background noise. But we're thrilled to do a supplemental log for the G&T show that features Mr. Marc Cushman, who has written a brand new book that everybody's been so excited about called These Are the Voyages. And I can't thank you enough for lending us the book and letting us take a look at it. My husband bought it from you yesterday.
Well, then I can't thank you enough.
And welcome to the G&T show.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And by the way, it's book number 1.
It is book number 1.
These Are the Voyages, TOS Season 1.
That's awesome.
They're all written. I spent 6 years writing these 3 books.
Well, I was going to ask you, the amount of detail that we have seen just in book 1, how long has it taken you for book 1? But you're saying all 3 are done?
Yeah, about 2 years each. They're all done. We're spacing them out by a few months. So like book 2, season 2 will be out in November.
Okay.
And they get better. Each book's better. As good as book 1 is, and the reviews have been incredible, but like a good movie, the story gets more interesting as it goes along. And you may say, well, the 3rd season wasn't as good as the 1st season, but you know what? They were working harder in the 3rd season. They had so much going against them by that point that it was just so dramatic and so tragic in a way to see everything they were fighting against.
Right.
So it makes very interesting writing for me, and I think it makes very interesting writing for those reading it.
Right.
Reading it.
One of the things that I noticed in going through the book was so many of the Star Trek stories about this show have been told, how it came to be and everything, but you delved really deep, like Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's involvement in it, and the importance, and also there's some really good television history in here. Desi and Lucy's smarts in creating Desilu, and then how Star Trek came to be from that.
And gambling, the board of directors of Desilu tried to talk Lucille Ball out of giving a green light to Star Trek. They said, you'll lose your studio. Well, stay tuned, gang. I think we all know what happens in book 2. And it's very dramatic and it's very sad. But she did lose the studio because of Star Trek.
Wow.
The studio, Star Trek bankrupt Desilu. It was the most expensive show on TV back then. It equated to about $1.3 million per episode now, which was unheard of.
Right, and people balk at that number now, even for science fiction, which is why it's so difficult, and we're still fighting to keep science fiction on.
Yeah, those budgets were about $190 grand, but if you multiply that based on inflation, it's about $1.3 million. And an outfit like Desilu could not afford the show. They wouldn't be able to recoup any money until reruns. And they didn't have pockets deep enough to make it. So the board of directors was right, but it's a very dramatic story as far as what she went through to try to make the show possible. And what you said, I delved deeper. Well, that was, if I didn't, there wouldn't have been a point to write this book. Gene Roddenberry dared me to write this book.
He dared you to write it.
Because when I was writing for Next Generation, he told me these amazing stories which weren't in the making of Star Trek or anywhere else. And he took me into a room and showed me 70 boxes this big, about 3 feet long, a foot high, about 2 feet wide, filled with memos and every draft of everything they had done. And he said, there's the story of Star Trek right there. We saved everything. He said, I dare you, put that in a book. Well, that's why it took 3 books. And they could have been a lot bigger. But I put in just the really interesting stuff.
Well, Nick and I have had the opportunity to kind of scan over the book. We just got the book yesterday. Nick's been giving it, I know, well, it picks up, trust me, 25. And we ended up being able to kind of give a good, you put in so much information. It's not just your retelling of what happened. It is, you have evidence, everything is almost like, this is what happened based on, it's a historical, it's a historical book.
For our fans that are listening, I would say this is the written equivalent to a Ken Burns documentary.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it.
Thank you. That is a great way to say it, and because I enjoy those, and I guess that was in my mind as well. See, as a television writer, and that's my background,
right?
Writing and directing for TV. In screenplays, it happens now. You're not writing about something from 50 years ago. It's happening right now in front of the camera. It's you are in the moment. And so this book works as a time machine. It takes you back, and you are literally on the sidelines watching Roddenberry and his staff pick a script apart with their memos and everything they're saying to each other. And then you are watching the episodes being filmed. You know what was shot on what day at what time, how late they went, what went wrong that day, who got sick. Michelle Nichols was in a car crash on the way in and had to get her lips stitched and still appear in front of the camera. Things like this you find from all the production notes that were being made at the time. Plus I'll find at least one tour guide for each episode. Somebody who's there, a guest star. See, I love the guest stars because they were only there for that one episode, so it's so vivid in their memory.
Right.
So I'll find a guest star from that episode to walk us through their experience of being on those sets for the first time. What did it feel like? How did the paint smell? Everything to give all of our sensations alive. So it is a time machine. You go back in time to witness the writing and the making of Star Trek.
That is really amazing. And through your process of doing the research for this book, you said there were boxes and boxes and boxes of it. What was the hardest thing for you to do to go back to organize everything that you had?
Well, yeah, that's it. 70 boxes. So what you do is when you start going through it, you break them into episodes and subjects. And this all pertains to the Naked Time. And this all pertains to the writing campaign to save Star Trek. And then you've got these files full of documents, and you go through and start highlighting the parts that you're going to put in the books. And it's a shame because Robert Justman wrote the funniest memos. You may have read a few. And to cut any of his memos out is a crime. There should be a whole book just of Bob Justman's memos. But I couldn't put in every word or it would be 10 times this size.
Right.
So I had to put in what I thought was the most relevant or the funniest for the moment to what they were dealing with. And so it was a matter of me picking and trying to create the drama that was going on. Not create drama, but report the drama.
Right.
Be sensitive enough to what the drama to where I can feel it and convey it to you.
Well, with the experience that you've had as a television script writer, what was the sense that you got? Because a lot of our listeners are the people who are just beginning to write, learning how to write, or even just enjoying how stories are told. As a person who's used to creating stories and putting forth that storyline and getting people to care, the emotion, the humanity behind any given story, what was it that drew you to any particular form of tale? Because the way I see this book is that it's done episode by episode of the original series.
Chronological order, because every episode they shot impacted everything that would come after that. So you have to tell it in sequence.
And you said that you chose a particular person to kind of be the guest guide through a particular episode. What was the driving force behind your decision on who that person would be?
Well, for the portion of the chapter about the script, I tried to get the writer who wrote the script. If he was no longer with us, I looked for archival interviews to get his voice in there. And then I interviewed Dorothy Fontana, who's the script consultant, so she was involved in all of them. Bob Justman, Roddenberry. I interviewed Roddenberry in 1982 and 1990. And those interviews are just now coming out, talking in depth about a lot of these episodes. John D.F. Black, because they were there for the writing process. So I talked to them about the scripts. And then I used their memos, so it's not up to their recollection. You can hear them talking to each other in the moment about what is this script working and why isn't it and what can we do. So in a way, this book would make a great screenwriting book, how to write a screenplay.
I was going to ask just that. I was going to say it's going to end up being almost like a textbook on what it is that, not just the process of creating a television show in the 1960s, but whether or not, in your own personal experience, how much has that process really changed over the decades?
I teach a screenwriting class at Los Angeles University, and we use Star Trek a lot, because I'll say, how many of you have seen Schindler's List? And one hand will go up. How many have seen Saving Private Ryan? One hand will go up. How many have seen Star Trek? Everybody raises their hand, no matter what age. So we'll use Star Trek a lot of times as an example of theme, putting theme into a story, which Gene was real important to him. He was the only producer I ever talked to who said, what's the theme of that? When I pitched Sarek to him for The Next Generation, he said, great idea, a story about a Vulcan going through senility. But what's the theme? What are you trying to say? He wanted to make those statements. So I learned a lot from him about theme. I learned a lot from their memos about how to fine-tune a script and how to keep the story urgent for the protagonist, James Kirk. Even if you think it's a Spock story, it's about the protagonist of Star Trek, James Kirk, who starts every episode with his captain's log. He's telling the story. So in Amok Time, yes, it's about Spock going through his 7-year cycle, but it's more about Kirk dealing with Spock going through his 7-year cycle.
Right.
If you really analyze those episodes, they knew what they were doing, these guys. And by reading this book and the next two, you can see how to write a good screenplay. You'll feel like you've been on the Star Trek staff because you'll feel like you've sat in all the meetings as they hashed out all the scripts, including the ones that didn't get made, and there were a lot of them.
Wow.
The Treks that never happened. A lot for each season that nobody even knows about from famous science fiction writers, but you'll be finding out in these 3 books.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now I've got a few questions for you. First is any of your guides to this, or how much did you talk to people like the hardcore fans would know, Eddie Paskey, who was there for as much as anybody, maybe even more?
I interviewed Eddie.
How was that? Because Mr. Leslie has taken on a life of his own among fans.
Yes.
As always being there.
Yes.
So how is that for...
It was great, and I loved interviewing Eddie and Billy Blackbird, who was there for almost every episode, because these were the lighting stand-ins, for Kirk and Spock and McCoy. They had to be on set every day, so they gave them regular parts in the bridge to, one, make us feel like it was a family, there's recognizable faces, but also because they had to be there for the lighting setups. So I interviewed Eddie in great detail and all the others because they all had great stories. And one of the things I do in this book, which you may have noticed, is I point it out. I'll say, you'll notice Eddie Paskey back there in the red in this position. And he'll tell a story about doing the lighting setup for William Shatner. He knew in Charlie X that Shatner, when he got the pain, he was going to fall on the floor towards the camera. Because he knew watching Shatner he was going to do that. In the rehearsal, Shatner didn't do it that way. So now they're lighting the set, and they're having Eddie stand in for Shatner to get the lighting right. And he says, he's not going to do it the way he did it in rehearsal. You watch. He's going to go towards the camera, with his face going right up to the camera. They lit it that way. Sure enough, Shatner did it that way. And the head of lighting department, the story's in here, he came over to Eddie and he said, I'm going to reward you. That's your station over there, right? The little engineering station? I'm going to hit that with the key light. You're going to stand out and you're going to pop out in every episode. People are going to notice you.
So are people like Eddie unsung heroes of Trek that we love?
Oh, yeah. They really are. And he left halfway through the 3rd season because of migraines. He had a head injury and a light fell on his head and he was in an automobile accident. And the hot lights caused him to get these terrible migraines. So he had to leave after the Tholian Web. After Is There in Truth No Beauty? He got pushed back against a railing in the fight scene when Spock was taken over by this thing. His back hit that railing and it went out. He had to go outside and lie down on the pavement. And he said between the headache and the backache, he just couldn't do it anymore.
Oh, what a shame.
So he was heartbroken to leave the show. But these guys were in more episodes than anybody other than the regular stars.
Now, one of the things you talked about was the stories being told through Captain Kirk because of the captain's logs. Now, I noticed from the first season, if you go through and you watch, the captain's log changes tense in the way originally it was as if it was recorded, we are in orbit around Mr. Spock and I beam down, And then later on, the way that the logs are recorded changes.
Yeah, it's in the moment. Yeah. Because that's the best way to write television movies. It's happening now. And when they first introduced the captain's log, the idea was kind of like a captain's journal recalling what happened. But that was going against the nature of TV writing where it's happening right now. So after a few episodes, they thought, let's change the tense of this and make it more urgent. And I think it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So in those first episodes, yes, you get to see the development of Star Trek, and some things got changed. Now you wonder why in The Enemy Within they didn't take the shuttlecraft down to save these guys. They had already thought of the shuttlecraft. They had already designed the shuttle bay. You saw it on the back of the ship. They didn't have the money to build the shuttle until Galileo 7, until they got their mid-season pickup.
That's one of the great jokes that fans ask each other is why didn't they just take the shuttle down?
It wasn't working that day.
The parts were arriving on Tuesday.
That's right. Scotty had pulled the motor apart to do a tune-up. How did he know this was going to happen?
Now, as the writer of one of the classic TNG episodes, if I may say that to you, what was it like to work with Mark Leonard, who the Romulan commander was such a memorable, with no name, but yet one of the most, and then Sarek, so nuanced in the way he did things.
Yeah, and Mark actually preferred the role of the Romulan commander.
Really?
Because he really loved that character. He thought this captain of great dignity, but who had humanity in him. He's that last moment when he says to Kirk, if we had met in another way, we would have been friends. I would have called you friend. He loved that role. And but he loved Sarek too. But if he had to pick between the two, that was his favorite.
That's awesome.
But Sarek was a terrific character, and I went to Gene when I pitched Sarek, which was between the first and second season during the writer's strike at Gene's house. And I said, how long do Vulcans live to be? And he says, we haven't figured it out. We think between 350 and 400.
Wow.
So I said, how old was Sarek in Journey to Babel? He says, probably around 150, 175. And I said, next generation is 100 years later? He says, yeah. I said, so he could still be alive. He'd be like maybe a 90-year-old man. What if he was called out of retirement because only he could negotiate this thing from past experience? And what would happen if a Vulcan's going through senility? And Gene said, what would happen? And I told him what I thought would happen, and he said, write it. You know? And I knew he loved Mark. Everybody loved Mark Leonard. He was just such a good man and a good actor and a caring man and a caring actor. And he was still working. And I said, Mark's still out there. And he's 20 years older. He probably won't even have to put that much makeup on. And they brought him back for that and then for one of the movies, or two of the movies, I believe.
He was in Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4.
And 6.
Yeah, and 6.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite scenes in 4 is at the end.
Oh, in 4. It was 4.
When Spock
You're right.
comes up to him and they have that talk. And he says, if I recall, I opposed your enlistment in Starfleet. And they just have that wonderful moment between the two of them.
Well, and he's in the animated episode from 1973, Yesteryear.
That's
now, did he do his own voice for that?
I don't know.
See, I haven't written a book on that one yet, so you can't blame me. That'll come next.
Oh, good. Are you interested in doing for the animated series? Because for years, fans considered there was that whole "is it canon" thing. I always thought of it as canon.
To me personally, it's canon because. Is that really her? I thought it's got to be canon because it's the original cast, and it was Roddenberry and Fontana who were doing it. It was all the original writers. I mean, it was just they got to do things they couldn't do in the live action, and it won an Emmy. It was an excellent show for Saturday mornings. I wish they would redo the animation now.
Oh yeah. We have talked about this.
Take that soundtrack and just redo all the images. My God, it would be something.
Well, there's a novel series called Star Trek Titan, which is Captain Riker on his ship, the USS Titan. I'm a huge proponent of. Have you seen the Clone Wars cartoon, Star Wars, that's done CGI, like Pixar type?
Spectacular.
Can you imagine a Star Trek show done like that?
Well, they've came up with a way a few years ago through computer animation to actually make somebody look human-like.
Right.
They could make somebody look like William Shatner, age 35 again.
Yep.
You know, and wouldn't that just be dynamite? I think everybody listening should write a letter to Paramount saying, do it. You guys will make a fortune. You got all those voices and the music and the original writers.
Right.
Just redo it. Man, God, I'd buy those things myself 10 times over.
In writing these 3 books,
yes.
What episode surprised you the most in researching it and was either, like Spock's Brain has been a lot of, was it supposed to be a comedy?
No. Spock's Brain, now that's in book 3, but I'll give you a little sneak preview.
Right, well, because we've discussed this, that there's that rumor that it was originally supposed to be like a piece of the action or something like that.
Not at all, not at all. Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn were sitting around and the first heart transplant had just taken place. And it was major news. People were out protesting this all around the world. It was all over the news. And they're watching this in fascination. And both of them thought it was great that there'd been a heart transplant, but they're looking at all this turmoil because of it. And they said, what would be worse than that? What would shock people more than that? A brain transplant. It was a great idea. If you know the context of the time period, it wasn't a bad idea. Now, it didn't execute as well as it could have. Although it's a well-directed episode by Mark Daniels, but it kind of ran out of steam in Act 4, and it, you know, but they should have had somebody kind of cynical in the room saying, the audience may giggle. But they were so caught up in that news event that they said this could be a very time-urgent episode. And just like the Enterprise incident was based on the Pueblo incident, which was happening at the time. But if you want to talk about book 1, one of the most shocking episodes was, I'll tell you, the 3, the alternative factor. What went wrong? I think we'll all agree that's probably the one episode from the first season that doesn't work.
Is that the one? Did Barrymore really get blacklisted after that?
Yep. Oh, they took him to court. It's all in there. You even know who the judges were: Charlton Heston and a few others. Ricardo Montalban.
I know.
Ricardo Montalban was one of the judges that they didn't go because he walked out on the first day of production, and they had to scramble to replace him and reshoot a bunch of stuff. He had a good reason for walking out. NBC gutted that script. It had the first interracial kiss in it, which Star Trek did 2 years later. NBC forced Gene Kuhn to take the romantic element out of that story. Drew Barrymore comes in, he's sitting in makeup looking at the script, and it's been totally changed, and it's not as good. He said, this isn't what I signed up to do. And he leaves. They scrambled. I interviewed Robert Brown in detail. They got a hold of him at 11 o'clock at night. He had to be in at 6 in the morning. They got him a motel room right by the studio. He couldn't even go home. He was playing catch-up through the whole thing. He said it was the shoot from hell. He's happy he did it because he's proud to be part of Star Trek. It was no easy job for him.
Wow.
But 2 episodes, What Are Little Girls Made Of in Court Martial, went through such severe rewrites you won't even recognize Court Martial from the way it started because I give you all the information regarding the early drafts that Don Mankiewicz wrote. It changed completely. And so did What Are Little Girls Made Of because there was a threat of a lawsuit because Robert Bloch kind of ripped off a Voyage to the Bottom Sea episode. So they had to change it dramatically, especially the ending, so that they wouldn't get sued by Irwin Allen. So as you find out with all these memos, some of the urgency that's going on in the last minute as the cameras are rolling, doing a rewrite.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we did want to keep you here all day, but we do want to say thank you so much.
You got to get back to reading the book.
We do. I really do.
We could keep you here all day talking about this.
Again, the name of the book is These Are the Voyages by Marc Cushman. It's volume 1 of 3 that will be coming out over consecutive periods of time.
Book 2 will be out in November in time for Christmas. Book 3 in February. We're spacing them 3 months apart because we figure it's going to take you that long
to get through
read it.
Yeah, it's in hardcover. Is it also on Kindle?
Not yet, but it will be in the next couple months.
Great.
We're debuting the hardcover here at the show, and Kindle will be coming up next.
Great. And where can people find the book? The typical booksellers?
You can buy it right now on Amazon.com.
Perfect.
But if you buy it from the publisher and request an autographed copy, I think they might be able to arrange it for you. Just Google These Are the Voyages, Marc Cushman. It'll take you to the various places you can buy it.
Fantastic.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming by.
It's a pleasure.
Nice meeting you, and good luck with the sales of the book.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
G&T Show is a Busy Little Beaver production.
Music for the G&T Show is provided by Warp 11, Grethor, 5 Year Mission, and Andrew Allen's Smooth Federation.